There is a neighborhood in Jerusalem where the electricity bills run at roughly a third of what comparable households pay in Tel Aviv. Same climate, same appliances on the market, same utility provider. The difference is not solar panels, though some houses have those too. The difference is a set of practices so deeply embedded in the daily and weekly rhythm of those households that the families living them have never once thought of them as energy-saving strategies. They are just how the week works, how the home is organized, how the kitchen runs, how the building was designed, how the community shares resources. 15 specific practices, each with roots in Jewish law, Jewish history, or Jewish domestic tradition going back centuries, that collectively produce an energy footprint so far below the modern average that most energy efficiency consultants, when shown the numbers, assume there is a metering error. There is no metering error. There is a system. And today we are going to go through all 15 components, one by one, in full detail, because the financial implications of applying even half of them to a modern household are significant enough to be worth understanding completely. To understand why Jewish communities developed such a distinctive relationship with energy consumption, you have to understand the specific historical and legal pressures that shape Jewish domestic life. For centuries, Jewish communities across Europe and the Middle East operated under conditions of economic constraint, severe enough that waste of any kind, food, money, fuel, warmth, light, was not just inefficient, but ethically intolerable. The Torah commandment of Bal Tashchit, do not destroy, do not waste, was applied by Talmudic authorities to every category of resource, explicitly including fire, fuel, and light. Wasting a candle was not careless, it was wrong, and a culture that internalizes waste as wrong, rather than merely expensive, produces energy behavior that no utility bill, however high, could ever fully motivate. That is the foundation. Everything else is built on it. The first practice is the one we have explored in previous videos, but which deserves its place at the top of this list, because its energy implications are the most structurally significant of anything here. It is Shabbat, the 25-hour weekly cessation of all creative activity, including the activation of any electrical device, from Friday at sundown to Saturday at nightfall. For 25 hours every week, 52 weeks a year, an observant Jewish household consumes zero incremental electrical energy beyond what was already running when Shabbat began. No new lights switched on, no appliances activated, no heating or cooling adjusted, no television, no microwave, no washing machine, no phone charger drawing current. The household exists in a state of complete electrical stasis for an entire day every single week. Multiply 25 hours by 52 weeks, and you get 1,300 hours per year, the equivalent of 54 full days, during which the household's electrical consumption is locked at whatever level it was set before Shabbat began. For a typical household, that represents a reduction in annual electrical consumption that runs, depending on usage patterns, between 15 and 25%, not through any technological intervention, through a weekly practice that has been running continuously for 3,000 years. The second practice is the pre-Shabbat energy audit, the comprehensive review of every electrical system in the house that must happen before Shabbat begins. Before the candles are lit on Friday afternoon, every light in the house must be in its correct configuration. Every appliance that does not need to run through Shabbat must be turned off. Every timer must be programmed for whatever lighting will be needed. This is not optional, and it is not casual. It is a systematic walkthrough of the entire household's electrical state, performed every single week without exception. Most households have no regular mechanism for reviewing what is consuming electricity and whether it actually needs to be. Appliances left on standby, lights burning in empty rooms, heating systems running at levels nobody has questioned since the thermostat was installed. These invisible drains accumulate, unexamined, across years of inattentive consumption. The Shabbat preparation forces an examination of all of them, every Friday, because failing to examine them means either violating Shabbat by switching something off after it has started, or running something unnecessarily through 25 hours of Shabbat because nobody caught it beforehand. The weekly audit catches waste before it becomes a habit. And habits caught weekly do not compound into the invisible expensive baseline that most households carry for years without noticing. The third practice is timer-based lighting control, which observant Jewish households have been using for decades before smart home technology made it fashionable for everyone else. Because switching lights on and off on Shabbat is prohibited, the only way to have light when you need it and darkness when you do not is to program timers before Shabbat begins. Every light that will be needed on Saturday morning is on a timer set to come on at the right time. Every light that will not be needed after Friday dinner is on a timer set to go off. The household's lighting runs on a programmed schedule rather than on reactive switching, and a programmed schedule, decided during a calm Friday afternoon, almost always uses less electricity than the reactive, leave it on because I might need it pattern that governs most households the rest of the time. Timer-based lighting reduces electricity consumption from lighting by a margin that depends on household habits, but consistently runs between 20 and 40% compared to manually operated lighting in equivalent households. Jewish homes have been capturing that saving for generations. The smart home industry rediscovered it recently and started selling it at considerable expense. The fourth practice is the blech system, the aluminum-covered stove setup that keeps food warm on Shabbat using a single low burner rather than active cooking on Saturday. We explored the blech in detail in a previous video, but its energy dimension is worth stating clearly here. A conventional household preparing a hot Saturday lunch, soup, main course, side dishes, would typically run the stove at high heat for 2 to 3 hours on Saturday morning. The blech system front-loads all cooking into Friday when it happens at moderate heat over several hours, and maintains the results through Saturday using the minimum flame required to keep food warm rather than the high heat required to cook from scratch. Low and slow heat maintenance consumes a fraction of the energy that high heat cooking from scratch consumes for equivalent quantities of food. The coolant that has been cooking since Friday afternoon on a single low burner under a blech uses less total energy over 16 hours of gentle warming than a pot of stew cooked from scratch at high heat for 90 minutes on Saturday morning. The food is better. The energy cost is lower. Every metric improves simultaneously, which is the characteristic signature of a practice that was developed under real constraints over a very long time. The fifth practice is the dud shemesh, the solar water heater that is ubiquitous on the rooftops of religious neighborhoods across Israel, and that was adopted by observant Jewish communities specifically as a Shabbat-compliant solution long before environmental consciousness made solar energy fashionable. Because heating water on Shabbat constitutes a form of cooking under Jewish law, households that wanted hot water available throughout Shabbat needed a system that heated the water before Shabbat and retained the heat without active heating during it. The solar collector that heats water during the day and stores it in an insulated tank is exactly that system. Israel's solar water heating adoption rate is the highest in the developed world, around 90% of households, and the religious community's early adoption for halachic reasons was a significant driver of that number. A solar water heater eliminates roughly 30% of a household's electricity consumption in climates with adequate sunlight because water heating is typically the second largest category of household electrical use after space conditioning. The religious communities adopted it as a religious compliance tool and got the energy saving as a byproduct. The byproduct is worth several $100s a year in reduced electricity bills. The sixth practice is the refrigerator light modification, the disabling of the automatic interior light in the refrigerator before Shabbat, so that opening the door does not activate an electrical circuit. In most observant Jewish households, the refrigerator light bulb is removed, or the door switch is taped before Shabbat begins, and in newer models, the Shabbat mode setting achieves the same result. The energy saving from eliminating the refrigerator light is individually small, a few watts per door opening. But a household that opens the refrigerator 20 times per day has disabled a light that activates 20 times per day, every Shabbat for a lifetime. The habit of modifying the refrigerator for Shabbat also creates an awareness of the refrigerator as an energy system rather than just a cold box, an awareness that tends to produce other energy conservative behaviors around it, including not standing with the door open, keeping it well stocked so the thermal mass reduces temperature recovery time, and positioning it away from heat sources. Small savings, consistently maintained, compound into meaningful annual numbers. The seventh practice is the candle culture. the specific Jewish tradition of directed, purposeful light that predates electricity by millennia and shaped the household's relationship with illumination in ways that persist into the electrical era. The Shabbat candles illuminate the table where the family gathers. They do not illuminate the entire house. The Havdalah candle burns for exactly as long as the ceremony requires and is then extinguished. The Chanukah candles are placed to illuminate outward toward the public, not inward to light the house. The consistent principle across all of Jewish candle tradition is light where it is needed, darkness where it is not. Purposeful illumination rather than ambient flooding of spaces with light, regardless of whether anyone is using them. That principle, culturally embedded across centuries of candlelit practice, produces households whose default relationship with electric lighting is considerably more intentional than the default in households without that cultural background. You do not leave lights on in empty rooms when the tradition has always taught that light is purposeful and its waste is wrong. The eighth practice is thermal mass architecture, the building tradition of Jewish neighborhoods that was driven by religious and social requirements, but produced passive heating and cooling properties that reduce mechanical conditioning loads substantially. Dense shared wall construction, interior courtyards, small windows on cold-facing walls, thick masonry walls that absorb daytime heat and release it slowly through cold nights. These are the architectural features of traditional Jewish neighborhood construction across climates as different as Poland and Morocco, because the religious requirement of walking to synagogue, the social requirement of community density, and the practical requirement of shared resources all push toward the same building form. Buildings with high thermal mass and shared walls require significantly less mechanical heating and cooling to maintain comfortable temperatures than freestanding buildings with 4 exposed exterior walls. The energy saving from thermal mass construction, compared to lightweight construction of equivalent floor area, runs between 20 and 40% of annual space conditioning costs depending on climate. The Jewish neighborhood arrived at that building form for reasons that had nothing to do with energy efficiency and everything to do with community life. The energy efficiency was the byproduct. The ninth practice is the Kolant principle applied to cooking energy more broadly, the cultural preference for low and slow cooking methods that extract maximum culinary value from minimum fuel input. The Jewish culinary tradition is built around cooking methods that use time as a substitute for high heat. Slow braises, overnight stews, long simmered stocks, gentle oven-baked kugels. These methods use less energy per unit of cooking than high-heat fast methods and produce results that most high-heat methods cannot replicate. A cholent that cooks for 16 hours at the lowest possible flame uses less total gas or electricity than a quick braised stew cooked for 2 hours at medium-high heat. And the cholent is better. The tradition of building the cooking schedule around low-heat methods, driven by the Shabbat requirement, produces a household that habitually chooses the most energy-efficient cooking approach for the most energy-intensive meal of the week, 52 times a year, for a lifetime. The 10th practice is the communal oven, the sharing of heat sources across multiple households that reduces the per-household energy cost of cooking by distributing a single large heat source across many users. The traditional shtetl communal oven, where multiple families sent their cholent pots and their Shabbat dishes to be kept warm by a single baker's oven, is the historical expression of a principle that any sufficiently dense and organized community can still apply. One large, well-insulated oven, or cooking appliance shared across 10 households, uses less total energy than 10 individual ovens running simultaneously. The principle is thermodynamics. A larger thermal mass retains heat more efficiently than multiple smaller ones, and a shared appliance used at close to full capacity is more efficient per unit of output than individual appliances running at partial capacity. Modern expressions of this principle include community kitchens, shared Shabbat hot plate arrangements in apartment buildings, and the collective cooking events that still happen in many observant communities before major holidays. The 11th practice is clothing and textile management, the approach to household warmth that reduces heating loads by managing how people dress before adjusting thermostats. The Jewish tradition's emphasis on appropriate, dignified dress for Shabbat and for the home, the concept of kavod, honor, expressed in how one presents oneself, produced a household culture in which proper clothing indoors was the baseline expectation. The consequence, from an energy perspective, is that the thermostatic set point in a well-dressed household can be several degrees lower than in a household where people sit at home in minimal clothing and reach for the thermostat when they are cold. Every degree of thermostat reduction represents a 3 to 5% reduction in heating energy consumption, depending on climate and system type. A household that is consistently dressed appropriately for indoor temperatures that are 2 to 3 degrees lower than the comfort-seeking thermostat setting of the average modern household captures an annual heating saving that runs into the hundreds of dollars in cold climates, not through any technological intervention, but through the cultural habit of dressing for the temperature rather than heating the air to match the clothing. The 12th practice is water discipline, the approach to water heating and hot water use that Baal Tashchit produces in observant households. Hot water is among the most energy-intensive household commodities. Heating it accounts for a substantial fraction of total household electricity use in most homes, and the waste of hot water is directly translatable into wasted electricity. The cultural norm in observant Jewish households of not running water unnecessarily, rooted in the same anti-waste principle that governs food and fuel, produces measurable reductions in hot water consumption that translate directly into electricity savings, shorter showers, deliberate rather than habitual dishwashing, full loads in the dishwasher rather than partial loads run for convenience. These are the behavioral expressions of a water ethic that treats running hot water as a resource investment rather than a default background of daily life. The energy saving from deliberate hot water management, compared to average household hot water consumption, consistently runs between 15 and 25% of water heating costs. The 13th practice is the Gemic principle applied to appliances, the community tradition of sharing equipment rather than each household maintaining its own full set of seldom-used devices. In observant Jewish communities, the Gamash extends to every category of household asset. A community member who owns a large pressure cooker does not expect every household in the community to buy one. A household with a rarely used bread machine makes it available to community members who need it for Shabbat preparation, and would otherwise need to own one themselves. The energy implication of this practice is that a community operating on Gamac principles avoids the manufacturing energy embedded in appliances that each household would otherwise own, and the standby power consumption of appliances that sit unused for most of the year. The most honest energy audit of any household includes not just the electricity consumed in operation, but the energy embedded in every device that was manufactured, shipped, and sits on a shelf drawing standby current for the 36 months between the 2 occasions a year it gets used. The Gamac reduces that hidden energy cost by reducing the total number of appliances that need to exist to serve the community's needs. The 14th practice is the Eruv and the walkable neighborhood, the urban density pattern that Jewish religious requirements created and that produces dramatically lower transportation energy consumption than car-dependent community layouts. We have discussed the Eruv in previous videos in the context of energy bills, but its place in a complete list of Jewish energy practices is non-negotiable. Transportation is the largest single category of energy expenditure for most households in car-dependent countries. In the United States, it accounts for roughly a third of household energy costs when fuel is included. A community in which religious requirements have created genuine walkability, synagogues, schools, shops, and community institutions all within walking distance because they must be accessible on foot on Shabbat, is a community with a structurally lower transportation energy bill than its car-dependent neighbors. The Eruv created walkable Jewish neighborhoods not as an environmental strategy, but as a religious necessity, and the energy saving it produces is available to every member of the community regardless of their level of observance, simply by virtue of living in a neighborhood dense enough to walk. The 15th practice is the deepest and the most transferable of everything on this list, and it operates entirely at the level of perception rather than technology. It is the weekly experience of Shabbat, 25 hours of genuinely living without electrical appliances, as a recalibration of what is necessary versus what is merely habitual. The observant Jewish family that has spent every Shabbat for 40 years without a television, without a microwave, without a phone charger, without any of the electrical infrastructure of modern convenience, knows something in a bodily, experiential way that no energy efficiency article can teach. Most of what we consume electrically is optional. not theoretical optional. Lived, weekly, repeatedly confirmed optional. The family that has eaten well, rested deeply, connected meaningfully with family and community, and felt genuinely restored every single week for decades, without any of those devices running, has empirical evidence from their own lives that those devices are not necessary for quality of life. And that empirical knowledge produces a different baseline relationship with electrical consumption than the one that governs most modern households, where every device was added incrementally until the aggregate became invisible, and where nothing is ever questioned, because nothing was ever absent long enough to be evaluated honestly. The household that turns everything off every week knows what it actually needs. The household that never turns anything off is guessing, and the household that is guessing always pays more. When you look at all 15 practices as a system rather than as individual tips, what becomes clear is that Jewish energy conservation is not a collection of tricks. It is an integrated architecture, legal, cultural, physical, psychological, in which every component reinforces every other. Shabbat creates the weekly audit. The weekly audit creates the timer discipline. The timer discipline creates the awareness that makes Baal Tashchit operational. The communal density creates the walkability that reduces transportation energy. The walkability creates the shared infrastructure that reduces per household appliance loads. The candle tradition creates the lighting intentionality that reduces illumination waste. The cooking tradition creates the low and slow habits that reduce cooking energy. And the weekly experience of Shabbat stillness recalibrates the entire household's perception of what electricity is actually for. Pull on any thread and you find it connected to every other. The system is self-reinforcing at every level, which is why it produces results that no individual energy-saving tip could replicate on its own. Here's the overlooked gem in all of this, and it might be the most immediately useful insight in this entire video. Of all 15 practices, the single one that requires no community infrastructure, no architectural modification, no new appliances, and no religious practice is the weekly 5-minute energy audit. Every Friday, or whatever day you choose, consistency matters more than timing. Walk through the household and ask the same question the Jewish household has been asking before every Shabbat for 3,000 years. What is running in this house? Does it actually need to be running? And what can be turned off before another week passes without anyone noticing? That question, asked honestly and consistently once a week, catches the standby draws and the unnecessary lights and the appliances left on from Monday that nobody remembered to turn off. It catches the habits that became expensive before anyone decided they were worth the cost. And it catches the baseline creep that adds $20 a month to the electricity bill before the bill itself catches anyone's attention. The Jewish household has been doing it, embedded in Shabbat preparation, since before electricity existed. The saving it produces is not dramatic in any given week. Across a lifetime of weekly attention, it is enormous. From the complete electrical stasis of Shabbat to the solar collectors on Jerusalem rooftops, from the blech's low-flame cooking economy to the walkable Eruv neighborhood that eliminates a third of transportation energy, Jewish communities have built a relationship with energy consumption that the modern world is only beginning to understand it needs. Not because they were trying to build an energy system, because they were trying to honor obligations, to rest, to not waste, to prepare before the moment of need, to share with the community what the community can share more efficiently than the individual. And the energy system is what those obligations produced when they were practiced consistently across every household, every week for 3,000 years. If you have found value in exploring the practical wisdom embedded in Jewish tradition, subscribe for more deep dives into the knowledge that these communities have developed across centuries of real-world problem-solving. And if you have got your own experience with any of these practices, share it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. And if there is one idea worth taking from all of this, the household that turns everything off once a week knows what it actually needs, and pays only for that.